2005, Chrysler sold 649,293 cars, spread across 7 models, the 3 major American automakers. Now, 20 years later, the brand has nearly disappeared. The only vehicle it currently makes is a minivan.
It just wasn't getting the attention and the investment that it deserved.
An enthusiast news outlet summed it up by saying, Chrysler, once an industrial giant, is a shell of a brand.
They didn't crash, they didn't fail, they were erased on purpose. Across the country, American car models are disappearing from production floors and dealer lots. No public outcry, no final send-off. Just a quiet kill order handed down behind closed doors, while buyers are still in the dark. Why are brands abandoning their best-known vehicles? Who made the call to pull them without replacements? And what happens when your next car doesn't even exist anymore? Chrysler 3, the muscle sedan nobody remembers. Bold, imposing, and unapologetically American. The appeal of this full-size sedan once rested in its ability to merge brute muscle with luxury polish, with a silhouette inspired by European elegance and a growl lifted straight from Detroit's muscle car lineage. It gave everyday drivers a taste of prestige without the price tag. It didn't whisper down the road, it thundered, and for a while it held a unique space in the market as a refined cruiser with a V8 soul. Built on the same platform as the Charger and the Magnum, this sedan wore many faces, from executive class trim to street custom lowrider. It attracted everyone from older professionals to custom car enthusiasts who wanted their ride to look like double the price. Rear-wheel drive dynamics, a high-output Hemi engine, and an aggressive stance made it stand out in a parking lot filled with jelly bean-shaped crossovers. It wasn't just a car, it was a declaration that you valued presence over trend. For many years, the Chrysler 300 held on while other large sedans fell away. It survived bankruptcies, ownership changes, and shifting market winds, yet the brand behind it seemed almost embarrassed to keep it going. Chrysler, now a small shadow of its former self under the Stellantis umbrella, made little effort to promote or modernize it. There were no meaningful redesigns, no hybrid variant, no electric option. In a time of automotive transformation, the 300 sat still as crossover culture took over and practicality became the top priority. Buyers stopped asking for big, bold sedans. The younger generation wanted wireless charging, digital dashboards, and height, not heritage. The 300's interior fell behind. Its tech aged, and even its once impressive styling grew stale. The design that had once looked like a bargain, Bentley began to feel like a relic of a forgotten era. Official production will end in the year 2023. There will be no successor, no commemorative send-off, just the quiet end of a nameplate that once roared. The Chrysler 300 will fade into the background with little more than a factory notice and a final batch of fleet orders. No electric plans, no concept teasers, just a void where an American icon once stood. But while the 300 fades away, this next one was erased before most people even noticed. Ford EcoSport, the tiny sport utility vehicle that never fit in, designed to be Ford's ultra-compact answer to urban driving. This vehicle entered the American market with high hopes, small on the outside, tall on the inside, and pitched as the perfect alternative to bloated crossovers. It seemed tailor-made for city dwellers and budget-conscious first-time buyers. The formula was simple. Take Ford's global platform, inject some compact sport utility vehicle aesthetics, and price it low enough to grab attention in a crowded segment. Unfortunately, what looked promising on paper drove clumsy on pavement. Built in India and launched in the United States of America in the year 2018, the EcoSport arrived as an outdated product in a segment evolving rapidly. It lacked the refined ride quality of competitors. Its cabin felt noisy and underwhelming, and the powertrains were universally criticized. Buyers quickly discovered that what it offered in size and price, it lacked in nearly every other category. Some of the design choices didn't help. A side-hinged rear cargo door made tight urban parking a hassle. The interior was filled with hard plastics and minimal technology. Despite a tall profile, cargo space was limited and oddly shaped. Even all-wheel drive, while offered, couldn't mask the lackluster handling or the dated 6-speed automatic transmission. Compared to rivals like the Honda HR-V, Hyundai Kona, or even Chevrolet Trax, the EcoSport failed to make a compelling case. Ford never committed to improving it. There were no meaningful redesigns or interior upgrades. As other manufacturers leaned into electrification, safety tech, and infotainment, the EcoSport remained static. Its presence in Ford's lineup felt more like an obligation than a priority, a legacy holdover from overseas that never truly found its audience stateside. Sales were modest at best and dropped quickly after the initial curiosity faded. Ford pulled the plug on the EcoSport in the year 2022, officially ending its North American run with little fanfare. It exited the market as quietly as it entered, leaving behind few fans and no successor. In the end, it became a placeholder rather than a product, a misfit in a lineup that was evolving past it. If the EcoSport was a mismatch, our next entry is a full-size icon that's simply out of time. We tracked internal memos, plant closures, and sales data across 15 brands to build this list. If you've owned one or watched it disappear from your dealership, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe. This is the history they're trying to bury. Dodge Charger going out with a roar. Raw power, street presence, and unapologetic attitude. That was the real appeal of this full-size sedan. For decades, it stood as a symbol of American muscle. Rear-wheel drive, loud exhaust, wide stance, and the kind of aggression you could feel through the steering wheel. It was not built to blend in, it was built to dominate. Whether rumbling through a city block or launching off the line at a weekend drag strip, it made sure everyone knew who was in control. The Charger's gas-powered lineup offered a wide spectrum of choices, from the V6-powered base trims to the fire-breathing SRT Hellcat editions, fitted with supercharged V8 engines. Horsepower numbers soared into the 700 range, making it one of the most powerful sedans on the planet. Dodge did not just embrace muscle car heritage, it weaponized it for modern streets. Even in an era dominated by crossovers and electrification, the Charger clung to its roots with grit and growl. What made it even more appealing was accessibility. You did not need a six-figure paycheck to drive something thrilling. A modest budget could still buy a rear-wheel drive V8 sedan with real attitude. It was a working man's sports car wrapped in four-door practicality. While German performance sedans demanded premium dollars, the Charger gave you tire smoke and torque without the pretense. But all eras come to an end. With the automotive world shifting rapidly toward electrification, even Dodge, once the loudest voice for combustion loyalty, has conceded. The Charger as we know it is being retired. Production of the gas-powered model will officially end in the year 2023. Dodge is transitioning into its new electric muscle identity, with teaser reveals of the next-generation Charger powered by batteries and synthetic exhaust notes. This isn't just about emissions regulations or changing tastes. It's the final chapter of a long and thunderous story. The last affordable American muscle sedan is being laid to rest. Enthusiasts are scrambling to grab final year models. Collectors are bracing for future value spikes. And Dodge is already speaking the language of kilowatts and lithium. Once it's gone, there will be no direct successor, no V8 rumble, no gas-powered replacement. Just memories, YouTube compilations, and the faint scent of burnt rubber on the pavement. The Charger's farewell may be loud, but this next car is disappearing in total silence. Cadillac CT6, the flagship that couldn't fly. Cutting-edge technology, full-size comfort, and an ambitious return to luxury leadership. This was the promise of Cadillac's modern flagship. The CT6 was not just another sedan. It was Cadillac's declaration that it could challenge the best of Europe, offering refined styling, magnetic ride control, and innovations that rivaled Germany's most elite. Sleek, wide, and unmistakably premium, the CT6 had presence on the road and polish in the cabin. The real star, however, was not the design. It was the tech. Cadillac debuted its groundbreaking semi-autonomous system, Super Cruise, inside the CT6, making it the first American car to offer true hands-free highway driving. It featured a rear-wheel drive platform, advanced safety systems, and a whisper-quiet ride. For those seeking a mix of old-school luxury and next-generation capability, the CT6 offered a compelling case. On paper, it had everything Cadillac needed to reignite the brand's credibility, and yet, few buyers noticed. In a market obsessed with crossovers, sedans were already losing ground. The CT6, despite its engineering, never found its audience. Pricing confusion, overlapping trims, and unclear marketing blurred its positioning. It was not sporty enough to steal from the German performance crowd, nor classic enough to woo traditional Cadillac loyalists. Worse, it was surrounded by Cadillac's aging front-wheel drive sedans, which diluted its halo effect. Even its most powerful version, the CT6V with a twin-turbocharged Blackwing V8 engine, arrived too late and in too few numbers to make an impact. The brand's failure to consolidate and clarify its message left the CT6 adrift. Production ended in the year 2020 at the Detroit Hamtramck plant, with no equivalent replacement for the North American market. While China continues to receive new versions of the CT6, American buyers were left with a gap. Cadillac shifted its resources toward electric crossovers, like the Lyriq, effectively closing the chapter on full-size American luxury sedans. The CT6 did not fail for lack of talent. It failed because the market had already moved on, and Cadillac failed to move faster. Today, it remains a footnote in the brand's history, a technologically advanced flagship that came too late, shouted too quietly, and left too soon. Luxury could not save the CT6, but this next vehicle could not even survive the mid-size crowd. Chevrolet Malibu, the family sedan, that time forgot. Affordability, dependability, and a nameplate that once felt as familiar as morning coffee. That was the Chevrolet Malibu's appeal. For decades, it represented a safe, no-frills family sedan, offering solid fuel efficiency, room for 5, and just enough tech to stay relevant without overwhelming the driver. It was never flashy, but that was the point. The Malibu thrived by being predictable in all the ways buyers once loved. For budget-conscious households or fleet managers, it was a known quantity. During its heyday in the late 2000s and early 2010s, the Malibu served as a backbone for General Motors' mid-size strategy. Redesigned frequently enough to stay competitive, it was the American response to imports like the Toyota Camry and Honda Accord. With competitive pricing, available turbocharged engines, and later hybrid trims, the Malibu offered versatility to a broad audience. From rental fleets to suburban driveways, the car was everywhere. Then came the rise of the crossover, and the Malibu began to fade. By the time the current generation launched in the year 2016, it was already playing catch-up. Updates came slower. The design, while clean, lacked personality. Inside, the cabin leaned heavily on cost-cutting materials. Meanwhile, consumer tastes evolved rapidly, and the demand for sedans dropped off a cliff. Buyers wanted height, utility, and all-wheel drive, not a trunk and a lower driving position. General Motors did little to reverse the decline, as crossovers like the Chevrolet Equinox and Chevrolet Trailblazer gained traction. The Malibu sat quietly on showroom floors, with minimal advertising and almost no fanfare. Rumors of its cancellation began circulating as early as the year 2022. While GM extended its life temporarily, few expect it to last beyond the next product cycle. Fleet sales remain its only lifeline, but even that is shrinking as government and corporate buyers move toward electrified options. The Malibu's fall wasn't loud or sudden. It was gradual, like a song fading into silence. No final edition, no swan song, just a vehicle that once defined everyday American driving, now increasingly forgotten by the market it once served. A quiet goodbye for a car that never aimed to stand out, but once succeeded by fitting in everywhere. If sedans are a dying breed, this next crossover proves not even sport utility vehicles are safe anymore. Ford Edge, outclassed in its own lineup. Roomy, smooth riding, and positioned to split the difference between compact and full size, this midsize crossover once promised the perfect balance of space and maneuverability. The Ford Edge filled a niche that felt tailor-made for suburban drivers who needed more room than the Escape, but didn't want to jump into the bulk and price of an Explorer. With solid powertrains, optional all-wheel drive, and a cushy ride, it delivered an experience that made daily errands and long drives equally comfortable. When the Edge launched in the mid-2000s, it arrived at just the right time. Americans were shifting away from sedans, and the crossover wave was building momentum. For a while, the Edge held its own. It wasn't just a transition vehicle, it became a staple. Mid-cycle refreshes brought improved infotainment, safety tech, and even sporty trims like the ST variant, offering surprising acceleration for a mid-size crossover. But somewhere along the way, the market moved faster than the Edge did. Ford began investing more heavily in electrification and shifted its development resources toward newer platforms. As a result, the Edge was left to coast without meaningful updates. Even as buyers demanded more advanced driver assistance systems and next-generation styling, the Edge stood still. It offered familiarity, but in a segment where freshness drives decisions, that wasn't enough. The biggest problem: internal competition. The Escape grew larger and more refined. The Explorer was completely overhauled, and with the arrival of newer electric models like the Mustang Mach-E, the Edge began to feel like yesterday's answer to today's question. It was too big to be nimble, too outdated to be modern, and too generic to stir any emotion. Ford has confirmed that production of the Edge will end in the year 2025. There will be no direct successor in North America as Ford pivots toward electric sport utility vehicles and new architectures. Dealerships aren't mourning its loss. They're already reorienting their showroom floors. And for most buyers, the Edge's absence will barely register. It had a solid run, but few will call it memorable. Sport utility vehicle buyers moved on from the Edge, but this next car was doomed from the day it launched. Dodge Journey, the walking dead of crossovers. Affordability was the Dodge Journey's main selling point. A mid-size sport utility vehicle that promised 7-passenger capability, decent cargo space, and a low price tag that undercut nearly every rival in its class. At a glance, it looked like a practical solution for families who needed room on a budget. It had the dimensions, it had the flexible seating, and it had the appeal of not breaking the bank. For many budget-conscious buyers, it seemed like a no-brainer, especially when larger crossovers demanded 5 figures more. But the Journey's charm stopped at the window sticker. From its initial release, it lagged behind competitors in almost every measurable category. Outdated platform architecture, poor safety scores, underpowered engine options, and lackluster driving dynamics quickly gave it a reputation as one of the weakest mid-size crossovers on the market. What should have been a practical family vehicle turned into a cautionary tale about cutting corners for cost. Even as automotive technology evolved rapidly in the early 2010s, the Journey remained frozen in time. Infotainment systems were dated, interior materials felt cheap, optional features on other brands were either unavailable or poorly implemented here. And while Dodge gave it minor facelifts over the years, the underlying issues were never resolved. It felt like a vehicle stuck in the previous decade, both in form and function. The real problem was Dodge's unwillingness to retire or reimagine it. While competitors like Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai rolled out new generations with better tech, better fuel efficiency, and better safety, the Journey was left untouched. Instead, Dodge slashed its price further, pushing it toward rental fleets and discount dealers. It became the default choice not for those who wanted it, but for those who could afford nothing else. Production of the Dodge Journey officially ended in the year 2020. By that point, it had become a shell of its former self, ignored by marketing teams, abandoned by loyalists, and phased out without ceremony. It had no hybrid version, no electric ambitions, no future product plans. It simply ceased to be, quietly removed from the lineup like a discontinued appliance. Despite being on sale for over a decade, its legacy is defined more by neglect than impact. While the Journey dragged on too long, this next car ran out of road almost overnight. Chevrolet Bolt EV, a pioneering electric vehicle that burned too bright. Affordability and early innovation made the Chevrolet Bolt electric vehicle a game-changer when it debuted. As one of the first fully electric cars offered by a major American automaker to break the sub-$40,000 barrier, the Bolt opened the door to electric mobility for mainstream buyers. It was compact, efficient, and delivered real-world range that made electric driving feasible beyond short commutes. For many, it was their first taste of an electric future, without the premium price tag of a Tesla. At its core, the Bolt was a practical hatchback with a clever layout and enough interior space to surprise skeptics. Its instant torque, low operating costs, and smooth acceleration quickly earned it praise from industry critics. It even won awards for its forward-thinking engineering and usability. When it launched in the year 2016, General Motors was ahead of the curve, positioning itself as a serious contender in the electric race. But that momentum didn't last. Battery issues, including multiple high-profile recalls due to fire risk, eroded consumer trust. By the time these problems were resolved, the competition had surged ahead. New electric vehicles with better styling, faster charging, and more advanced platforms began flooding the market. The Bolt's once impressive specs no longer stood out. General Motors compounded the issue by shifting its entire electric strategy to the new Ultium platform. The Bolt, built on older architecture, was excluded from that transition. That meant no Bolt refresh, no major upgrades, and no place in the brand's long-term vision. Despite steady sales and strong customer satisfaction, once battery concerns were addressed, the Bolt became a technological orphan, outdated not because of poor reception, but because General Motors moved on. Production will officially end in the year 2023. No fanfare, no last hurrah, just a quiet end to one of the most important yet short-lived electric vehicles in American history. It succeeded too early, only to be left behind too soon. A trailblazer without a torch to pass on. If the Bolt couldn't make it in an electric vehicle world, this next model barely made it in any world. Ford Fusion, a silent exit for a once dominant sedan. Roomy, affordable, and refreshingly well balanced. The appeal of this mid-size sedan came from its ability to serve nearly every type of driver, whether it was a daily commuter, a small family, or a value-conscious fleet buyer. This car offered comfort, modern tech, and just enough performance to keep things interesting. For years, it was a steady presence on American roads. It was Ford's answer to the Honda Accord and Toyota Camry, and for a time, it actually made a dent. The Fusion launched with high expectations and quickly delivered. It featured a sleek, European-inspired exterior that set it apart in a sea of dull sedans. Inside, it offered features typically reserved for more expensive vehicles: dual-zone climate control, driver assistance systems, and even optional all-wheel drive. It was one of the first American sedans to embrace fuel efficiency without abandoning style. And while it never redefined the segment, it certainly modernized Ford's reputation among sedan buyers. Its hybrid and plug-in hybrid variants gave it additional relevance in the early stages of electrification. Ford positioned it as a smarter alternative to gas guzzlers, without requiring a dramatic change in lifestyle. Yet even as interest in hybrids began rising, Ford hesitated to double down. Updates were minimal, and technology began to lag behind competitors. The automakers seemed caught between two strategies: push for innovation or ride out the status quo. In the end, it did neither. By the late 2010s, the Fusion was showing its age. Compact crossovers were taking over, and Ford's focus shifted accordingly. With the rise of the Escape, Edge, and Explorer, the Fusion lost showroom priority. Marketing faded. Trim options shrank. It was clear Ford saw little reason to keep investing. In the year 2020, production officially ended. No public outcry, no farewell tour, just a quiet conclusion to what had been one of the most dependable sedans in Ford's history. Despite its strong early performance, the Fusion was left without a direct successor. Ford opted to exit the sedan segment entirely in the United States of America, ceding ground to Japanese rivals. For longtime Fusion owners, the end felt abrupt, but not surprising. A car that once carried the brand's ambitions was phased out with barely a whisper. Fusion disappeared without protest, but the next model was pushed off the edge by its own maker. Jeep Cherokee, left behind by its own brand. Capable, versatile, and steeped in off-road heritage, this vehicle stood out as the smaller sibling to one of America's most legendary nameplates. For decades, it was the go-to choice for buyers who wanted a rugged, compact sport utility vehicle without sacrificing urban drivability. It fit into garages, conquered snowy commutes, and carried on Jeep's adventurous image at a more affordable price point. When properly equipped, it even handled trail duty. This was a compact sport utility vehicle with legacy. The modern Cherokee re-entered the market in the early 2010s after a brief hiatus, aiming to revive a name with deep roots. It featured distinctive styling and a range of engine choices, including a V6 option that gave it unusual power for its size. It also offered advanced four-wheel drive systems and a surprisingly plush interior for a vehicle that could tackle mud and gravel. For a while, it carved out a loyal niche, drivers who wanted more capability than a crossover, but didn't need a Wrangler. Still, issues began to surface. The design, especially the polarizing front fascia, split opinions. Interior space lagged behind rivals, and while off-road features were appreciated by enthusiasts, the average buyer leaned toward comfort and tech. The Cherokee began to feel like a compromise, too rugged for some, not refined enough for others. Then came the overlap with the Grand Cherokee. As the larger model expanded its trims and capabilities, many buyers moved upmarket, blurring the line between the two. Production production for the Cherokee quietly stopped in the year 2023. Jeep shuttered its plant in Belvidere, Illinois, and offered no immediate replacement. The company has since redirected attention toward larger, more luxurious models, like the Wagoneer and Grand Cherokee L. The Trailhawk trim, once marketed as the adventure-ready variant, vanished from ads, with compact sport utility vehicles dominated by competitors like Toyota and Subaru. The Cherokee fell behind, and then off the map. In the end, it wasn't just competition that buried the Cherokee, it was Jeep's own strategy. By focusing on profit-heavy vehicles and global expansion, they allowed a core American nameplate to die out. What once symbolized accessible ruggedness is now just another discontinued badge. These models weren't just discontinued, they were erased quietly, strategically. If one of these cars meant something to you, or if you're watching your favorite brand fade out, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe, because we're tracking every model they're hoping you'll forget.